Not losing it. Hello, Susan. Hello.
So, hello everybody. You're very welcome. You can probably hear Susan has also joined us. Can I just ask if everyone could put their microphones on mute? That would be really helpful for the session. Thank you so much. Just to very quickly welcome everybody to this second session of Pathways. Really delighted you could join us this afternoon. My name is Carl Wallace. I'm the head of festival and events at the Arts Council here. And this initiative has been very much driven by festivals themselves on the back of a previous series that we conducted last year called Talking Festivals. I just wanted to take the opportunity to welcome Avril, Grace, John, Rowan and Dani. I'm really looking forward to your contributions and as I'm sure everyone else is, and thanks very much for taking the time to be with us this afternoon for what I'm sure is going to be a really interesting and dynamic discussion. I'd also just like to thank David Teevan. He's put huge amounts of hard work and thought into the curation of this programme and the diligence with which this programme has been created. So it's really important for the Arts Council to keep listening to festivals, especially over this period of time when we're affected by COVID. I have two things very quickly to mention, which is we're running a festival clinic on the 1st and the 9th of April, which may be of interest to festivals. It's a clinic which covers all the different funding schemes available to festivals over the course of the year. So you can contact my colleague Adrian Colwell if you'd like to sign up for one of those two dates. The other thing is just to let you know that in the course of our conversations last year, there were, and as part of Changemakers, our festival conference in February, we had quite a lot of discussions with festivals about the potential for additional resource supports for festivals to build their capacity. So I just wanted to let you know that we are doing a piece of work this year in the Arts Council, which is to try and establish a festival resource or a festival resource organisation. And we will be going into a consultation exercise probably in the next couple of months. And we'd really value your feedback and feed into that exercise. But just to let you know that work is ongoing. So thanks again for attending. I'm going to hand over to David, who's leading the session, and look forward to hearing your discussions at the end. Thanks.
Thank you, Carl, and thank you all for coming. We've had a great response to these events in the first one 2 weeks ago and today, and we've got two more coming in 2 weeks' time and 2 weeks after that again. Firstly, I have to say we're sorry for being a little bit late. There was a technical hitch, an internet connection that went down just before 3, so apologies for that. We're back up and hopefully everything will keep going. In welcoming everybody to the first panel session, Maureen Kennelly, the director of the Arts Council, spoke about the strength and resilience of this sector and of its importance to the arts infrastructure generally in the country. And the aim of this session is for us not just to hear what festivals have to say. So it's important to both use the chat and the breakout sessions, which will run from 4:30 to 5, to share with us your experiences and your ideas, because that will go into forming how we respond to the sector in the future. The format is the same as the first time. For those of you who weren't there, we're going to have 5 speakers, then we're going to have a question and answers, and then we're going to have a 5-minute break to get a cup of coffee. And then we have 4 breakout rooms sorted, and we have festival makers, Adele Doran, Eva Berthistle, Francesca La Morgia, and Cleanamar, who are going to facilitate them. Carl, myself, and Adrian, and another festival maker and academic colleague, Dani Lynch, are going to sit in as observers and take notes. So we hope you can stay on for that. The format of the 4 sessions is worked out along the idea of looking at 4 key areas of festival making. The first week we looked at planning. Today we're looking at mission. The next week we're looking at public engagement. And the week after we're looking at the creative act of festival making. And we're framing them within the context of COVID, because obviously all of these things have had to be remodeled during this time, and we believe will have impact going into the future. In my reading this week, I came across a quote which I wanted to share with you, that festivals are, and this was written before COVID, but it spoke about festivals not repeating a formula through habit, but ensuring that it continues to be relevant to the situation and time in which it is embedded. So that's always been the case with festivals, but it is so much more the case now. So we've invited for today 6 or 5 very, very different festivals. We're very conscious of the fact that this festival ecology is very diverse. It has different art form focus. Some are voluntary run, professionally run. Some are commercial, some are funded. And we're trying in this series to respond to the diversity of the different types of festivals. So today, as you will see, we've tried to do that, and we've also tried to bring in people who we wouldn't be familiar with from outside our own sector, and also from internationally. So we're very happy to welcome an international festival maker to today's meeting. So we're going to start off with somebody whom I think many of you will know, if not all of you. John Crumlish is the director of Galway International Arts Festival, which is one of the blue ribbon festivals in the country. He first worked with the organization as a volunteer during the 1990s, he was employed by the festival as production manager. After a period working with Macnas, he returned to the festival in 2003 to take up the role as CEO. During his tenure, he has overseen the organisation's development into one of Ireland's best-known cultural enterprises, with attendance of over 260,000 in 2019, and an economic impact of 34.5 million on the local economy. In honouring John in 2019, the Galway hospitality industry noted his vision, tenacity and foresight. And I have no doubt that these traits have been of tremendous value during the last year. And John, you're going to share with us some of the actions that Galway Arts Festival used to respond to COVID, and where you think that is taking you as an organisation going into the future.
Thank you, David. I'll try and get this screen up first. So welcome, everybody. I just wanted to, as David said, say a wee bit about what happened to us and where we think it might be going. So the context here is that in 2016, Galway announced, got the designation for capital culture in 2020. And with that, we decided that we would build up our capacity over the following 3 years to build up and do the biggest fest we'd ever done in 2020 and try and maximize the designation. So we built 2017 was the biggest festival we ever did, followed by 2018 the same, and then into 2019, where we got the attendance to over 250,000 and we did over 200 plus events, all with a view to 2020 being the crowning glory. And I should point out, from 2016, Paul Fahey, artistic director, was looking at things that we could progress over those number of years that would come to fruition in 2020. So that's the short version of the grand plan. The reality was slightly different when it became apparent that basically everything had changed. We had to change our dates. We knew we had to get out of the way of July because there was a roadmap put out by the government on May the 5th, I think it was, which basically meant venue restrictions, etc. were in until August. So we went for September. So as I said, we had this challenge of having built up a program, not in a year, but over 3 years to get to that point, most of which became unsuitable under the new public health measures. So we had to reimagine everything and basically put on a program that allowed us to operate under fairly strict public health measures, but ultimately became level 2 health restrictions. That's what we were operating under. So that was a big program challenge, and we just had to reimagine about going, if everybody remembers back then, everything, you know, get outdoors, there was the restrictions on indoors, etc. And there was all the, you know, PPE was starting to come in. It was a very quickly evolving situation at that time. So operationally, it was a huge challenge in the sense that, number one, we had to keep all our artists and all our audiences safe. And from a reputational point of view, you know, we couldn't afford anybody to get COVID-19 at the festival. We were very aware of just the reputational damage done to Cheltenham, for instance, as something that, you know, it just became this media event. So from an operational point of view, there was an awful lot of pressure on to basically observe the public health measures, but then go one step further. So we had our social distancing, our PPE, we had everything down to a T. And then we had basically people maintaining it all the way through to quite high standard to ensure that basically we did the very best that was possible under the circumstances. Another interesting aspect about it in terms of the operational challenge, you had to be quite flexible. I'll talk a bit about Mird Pavilion in a minute, but the thing about it was that outdoor restrictions, while Mird Pavilion was going up and while it was up and before it got down again, moved from a restriction of 200 outdoors to 15 outdoors and back to 100 outdoors. So each time we had to do a new plan for how we were going to work with those particular set of restrictions. So anyways, what we came up with became Autumn Edition. So the festival moved from July to mainly September. We had hoped to be going in October, but level 3 kicked in October, and that was that. So basically we did the vast majority of the festival in about 3 weeks in September. Again, in terms of reimagining, like, you know, our staples are visual arts, theatre, music, and then our talks. So we looked very much to visual arts in the sense we thought, you know, we had big enough venue, our festival gallery was big enough where we could implement social distancing and still do something meaningful. We could go outdoors. Theatre indoors was quite restricted in the sense we did one particular workshop of a new play by Andrew Walsh, Medicine, and what it should have been a 420 capacity venue was 49. So we were working with those. Another interesting one is the picture there you see is our festival gallery. And in 2.5 weeks in 2020, with social distancing in place, the total number visited the gallery was the exact same as the average daily in 2019 when there was no restrictions. So it was really reduced in that capacity. With regard to music, we went from a situation when we had our biggest Heineken Big Top program on to doing 4 concerts socially distanced to audience of 49 in St. Nick's. So there was massive changes in what we had to do. And in terms of our talks, again, we basically looked at them as a digital only with, and we had, I think, social distancing 38 people at each of those talks. The one thing that did go really well for us in terms of was Mird Pavilion. I don't know if people are familiar with it or not. This was our European Capital of Culture project. So we proposed this in 2016, and we just got very lucky in the sense that it being outdoors was ideally suited to presentation during the pandemic. It was, as you can see, it was a 7 meter high, 7 meter wide, 7 meter deep mirrored structure that basically reflected everything around it so the viewer could see themselves in the reflection. But meanwhile, on one side was a giant LED screen. And on that screen was an artwork by, new artwork by John Gerard, an Irish artist from Tipperary, who does amazing work in terms of technology and what he does with us. And basically this was he was very influenced by the escalating climate crisis. So these, as you can see, are 4 performers doing a never-ending performance in the exact same locality as the viewer is located. And the thing about this was a never-ending performance. It was on 24 hours a day. It did not repeat. And no matter what time you were there at, that was the time on the screen. And it went 24 hours a day. And it was basically all generated by using gaming technology, the latest gaming technology, to basically realize this, what he calls a hyper-realistic version of reality. So that was a huge flagship event for us in terms of the program, and we wrapped an awful lot of things around that. We were also very conscious of the fact that a lot of people were cocooning, so we decided we would develop a festival at home for people. So all of our talks were live streamed. We had a lot of interviews with the artists that were involved in the program. We launched a new podcast. We had online exhibition. We did gallery tours. And then we had a lot of featured packages, which were like making of a Merd Pavilion. I think there was 3 in that series. So we were very much focused on trying to deliver more to people who couldn't get to us. And basically, we wanted very much to stay in touch with our regulars, no matter whether they could make Galway or not. So that was kind of where we ended up in terms of the figures, in terms of the attendance at live events. Those figures for online were what watched it during the weeks of the festival. Obviously, they're still up there and people are still watching. We luckily had 180 volunteers and we had 67 artists and speakers. In the 2019 festival, it was closer to 600 artists and speakers. So that'll give you an idea of kind of the limit, the way we had to move, and operationally how we had to get on with things. Thankfully, the main KPI in it all was that nobody got COVID at the festival, nobody working on it, nobody involved in it, or nobody who attended. So that was major for us at the time. In the last couple of days of the festival, Dublin went into level 3 and the rest of the country followed suit soon afterwards. So our projected presentation at Merd Pavilion in Connemara could not happen. And we've kind of more or less stayed there since. So that was basically Autumn Edition. So then, like David asked the question, pivot or permanent? I'm reminded, that quote about the past is a foreign country and they do things differently there. Well, I think the same about this, that the past is different. And I think we will now move on to a new phase. I think we're looking at what people are starting to call blended festivals, where digital will become much more central to what we do, that there's there's going to be a lot more digital programming, a lot more about the festival digitally, etc., sitting as part of the wider program going forward. But I think a big thing within that going forward is the proposition. Like most people attending today, a big part of your kind of key selling point is the place, the people, and the atmosphere that is created in festival time. And we all sell off that, and we all get an awful lot of repeat visitors. We get an awful lot of people. Like, we're quite constant, if we can get people to Galway, that they'll want to come back because the place is lovely, the people at the festival are lovely, and there's a reasonable program. And I'm sure everybody's the same. Whether you're in Kilmanny or Clifton, it all has that magic around festivals. But what happens when you take the place away, and you're now dealing digitally? So there's 2 audiences involved now going forward in terms of the Splendid Festival. There are the people who will be in Galway for the festival, and there will be people attending the festival who are not in Galway. So in terms of that digital piece, I think we're going to have to get used to competing in a fairly congested marketplace going forward without some of our biggest assets, which is that atmosphere, the uniqueness of place, and just the kind of humor people are in during a festival. So I think that has major implications for how we market our festivals. And just like David said, it's about questions. And I think that's a key thing in this, in terms of you know, who are we marketing to? You know, is it to the people who want to come digitally, or the people who want to come to Galway? Where, as I say, there's now two markets, those that are going to come and those who are not. So what are the implications for that? And then associated with that is the kind of resources question. You know, if you're going to put something on and, you know, you have box office from it, you have funds to pay for things. But in terms of digital, we now are going to have to create an awful lot more digital content without it being very clear who pays for it. We will have to pay to produce it as festivals, but who pays to consume it? So I think that's a big question going forward, and it's not only in our sector, but it's all over as to what happens next with that. And in terms of organisations, then there's a new skill set required, there's a new way of looking at things required, and there's going to be training implications attached to all that. We're already started down that road in terms of digital. You know, we're all probably pretty good at the live. It's this digital piece that is going to be, we've been at it for years, but this puts a whole new feel. If we truly are going to be blended, what are the implications for the organisation, its strategy, for the people in the organisations, and what expertise we need to bring in from outside? So overall, I do think things are going to change. I have no idea how much they're going to change. I think we'll be still very much focused on our live experience, in the sense that is what got us to where we are, like every festival, but we're going to have to take on board an awful lot of new things. And in terms of what we're going to do, is going to have to be a lot of content generation, attractive content generation, and we need to be sure who we're marketing to. So they're just some of the questions in my 8 minutes that I wanted to raise. So that's me. Thanks,
and John, I thought you were going to be giving us some of the answers. But thank you. That was really superb. And I think that question of what happens when you take the place away is a very, very interesting articulation of a question which will be central to the conversation we have at the next panel, which is focusing on the digital and that new territory that we're all. I'm aware that Galway had already started working in that area. You had a head start, but a lot of festivals were entering it for the first time. I'm going to move along with, there's a couple of questions that come in on chat. We might get back to them in the question and answer. And you did touch on it, the budget aspect, John, of how this is going to be paid for, and the training aspects are certainly key questions that we can come back to, or we can, that the chat that people can contribute in the chat. But I'm going to move along to our next speaker, who has recently experienced the digital, I think, for the first time. Dani Gill, who is herself a poet, is the current artistic director of the Ennis Bookclub Festival, and was previously the director of Cuirch International Festival Literature in Galway. She also works as the National Audience Development Officer for Words Ireland, working with venues in 6 counties to strengthen and stimulate literary programming, including live events, workshops, and one-book projects. Having been able to run the Ennis Book Festival in 2020 as it fell the week before lockdown, Dani and Ennis Book Festival have recently had their first experience of delivering their event online. And Dani is going to share, so I think she's taken a moment out of her week off in recovery to share with us some of her learning and how their organization are imagining the future. Dani, you're very welcome.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, so as David has said, we just ran our first digital festival, and it was also my first year with Ennis as the artistic director. So I hope everyone can see my slides. I've gone into kind of, for this presentation, I guess, mindful of the people in the room, and many of you organisers yourselves. I went into kind of hard and fast facts about kind of pre-COVID and post-COVID and what the scenario looked like for us specifically. And then I'll go into the programme a bit and some of the decisions. But for us in a pre-COVID setting, Glór in Ennis would be our primary venue, and it's a 450 seat venue, so it's quite substantial. It's a 3-day event, and it's starting on a Friday through to a Sunday. In addition to Glór, the festival would also have used a number of venues around town, mainly hotels, a church venue. So they would have gone between 60 and about 120 in terms of capacity. So I suppose that was the potential capacity of the festival pre-COVID times. And in terms of box office, it did quite well. For a 3-day event, it was between 32 and 35 for the 3 days. And as John had said, and I would definitely echo, there is a question around box office. Ennis is mainly voluntary run. There's a committee, and then there's myself as artistic director, and there is an administrator, but that's our formation. So the festival would always have relied quite heavily on our box office.
Sorry, Dani, we just can't see your slides there. If you wouldn't mind trying that again.
Sorry. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes, that's perfect. Okay.
Thanks. So this is just what I've been saying there. So the venue capacity and box office for the event traditionally as of say 2020 anyway, this is the situation. When we were looking then at COVID and 2021, at the time of doing our Arts Council application, I'm sure others had this experience too. We were in the summer of 2020 when restrictions had lifted, and was one of the kind of the better times. And we had expected that Glóra would be open for 2021 and that we would be at half capacity, which was 225. By the time we obviously came into the autumn, that was completely changed. The scenario then was that the venue may not be open if we couldn't be at level 3 or lower, and if it was open, that the capacity would be 75, which is, you know, obviously a massive reduction. This kind of led to a big issue for us again in terms of box office, because our capacity to program and to run the festival is heavily dependent on box office. So box office potential with that 75 was about 12 grand, which is 20, you know, approximately 20k missing from the budget straight away. So that was kind of a concern. Rental costs and tech and associated costs were the same. And I guess, again, this is probably something that a lot of people can identify with. And what John has mentioned there about production, even around online events like that, I think we're going to be having a lot of conversations now about who are the audience, who is engaging with online material, what's a fair price for online material, what about access, you know, what about the data we collect from all of that? All of those questions, I think, are kind of coming up for us now. We went into 2021, I guess, with a lot of different kind of questions, and these were some of them, especially considering the digital context. It became increasingly apparent just before Christmas, and I guess post-Christmas we wound up in the new level 5, which was the most severe level 5. We had expected that there would be a spike. We were hoping that there might be a spike in January and that, you know, it might have kind of come down from there. So when we came back from Christmas break, we knew straight away, obviously, that we were moving to a digital platform. These were some of the questions that came up and that we debated. What John has said about a place, I think, is really important for a festival, because Ennis, the town of Ennis, the people of Ennis, and the support locally for the festival are a huge part of the personality of the event. How do you create in an online environment that sense of atmosphere, that sense of intimacy? Because I guess at the end of the day, a lot of festival activities usually are a live experience. So I think even the commitment from an audience member who makes that journey of purchasing a ticket, going into a space, being part of an event with others and with the performers is quite special. So we were mindful, I suppose. We did our research, like most people here probably have done, into platforms. What was the best platform? We used a kind of a mix in the end. We went between YouTube and Zoom. We did mix some of the formats, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But we also wondered things about expectations and like, what are our expectations for audiences now, especially digitally? What are our expectations for ourselves in terms of engagement? Like, one of the main things that Ennis tried to do was to uphold and keep all of our artist commitments, which we did do. We prioritized keeping the program that was envisaged, but being able to look at how to deliver it differently. We had delivered all of our key events between the 5th and the 7th of March, and we are having a day of events, hopefully in Glór in September, with certain things that could not happen in March. So we did diversify slightly in that sense. I know John is saying GIAF went for 3 weeks instead of maybe the normal 2. I know that ILFD have also done things like that. And I think it's that larger question, I guess, of you need a bit more time in some ways to engage with an audience, especially if it's digital. And it is a crowded space. And I think we have kind of general questions about that would definitely be worth discussing. These are some of the things that we did. And I suppose one of the first things that we thought about when we were coming near the time of the festival was, how do we announce our program, and what do we say about the program? Because at this point it had gone through 4 different evolutions. We did a launch promo video, and if you go to the Ennis homepage, it's there and you can watch it. But this actually turned out to be very meaningful in the sense that we really wanted to send a message, I suppose, directly to the people of Ennis and to people who would have been local and had enjoyed the festival, to talk a little bit about the journey that we had been on. So Cora, our chairperson, is on that video and I'm on it as well. And that whole question again, I guess, of space, it was important, I think, for us to acknowledge it and to acknowledge that we were going to be in a different capacity, but that we were still concerned with the audience and the existing audience and who might still be there in the ether who wanted to engage. We focused in on local partnerships, and one of the things that I thought about, I suppose, from a programming point of view was how to create variety in the program in terms of being in the digital space. So we went to Clare FM and we asked if they would broadcast 10 books, because 10 books is a very popular event at the festival. It's a regular annual event, and it's essentially 1 or 2 different people from the book world talking about books that they'd recommend, and it tends to be a very lively kind of a discussion that people really enjoy. And we were mindful of the limitations in some ways with the online space in terms of I guess with platforms and the decision between platforms. One of the things that I thought might be nice for radio was that it's audio and not just visual. And one of the other thoughts was with Donal Ryan, for instance, we did book club meet and greets. So these were small sessions on Zoom. They weren't webinars, they weren't public, we didn't record them. And they were 30-minute sessions where people could talk to Donal directly and ask questions. They were a totally different experience to the other events that we would have had. So we kind of looked at aspects of the program and what we might be able to do that would offer something a little bit different to audiences. So although we would be on a digital platform, I guess we tried to look at different avenues into that space and what might work. A great initiative came out of lockdown and COVID, and it was the TY Book Club initiative. And I think there's probably been these sort of finds for lots of people in this room, things that were started, I guess, because of COVID and the limitations that it put on us and the expectation that it would have placed as well in terms of engagement. So Sarah Moore Fitzgerald engaged with TY groups across the county and met with them for various sessions between the autumn and early into this year. And then during the festival, she did a live event with Louise O'Neill, and it was brilliant. It went really well. And I think we discovered in that a seed of something that we want to continue on into the festival. So as John has said, there's certain things that have come up that definitely are things that we would develop and have a kind of an outreach aspect, I guess, that we think will strengthen the festival. Some of the other program inclusions format wise, Nisha Dolan asked the author and Kevin Barry, that Old Country Music. We made a short film of Kevin Barry's short story. We ran that along with his interview, again, to kind of just offer something a bit different curatorially in terms of the program. And
Dani,
Nisha Dolan did and asked the author, yes?
Can you, can we move towards a conclusion in terms of timing? Thank you.
Sure. So in terms of outcomes, like this is the final slide, and I suppose we had some really good reach and new users and new visitors in terms of social media and our website, and there's greater detail obviously in those areas. We got very good feedback in our surveys. Audiences, again, I put this in kind of as a discussion point, I guess. If you include the radio offering, the reach of that is quite substantial. And if you look at kind of the viewings of events online plus people who attended in a live sense, I think there's some interesting questions there about what we consider to be audience now, and how do we collect that data, and again, how can these things kind of possibly be useful to us in planning ahead into the future to see what reach might be achieved through being in the digital space. Okay, there you go, David.
Thank you very much, Dani. Sorry to rush you there. I'm just conscious of time. I attended several of the events, and it's interesting that you started off talking about place and the importance that you, as an organization, brought to framing what you were doing within the context of Ennis. And I thought that was very successfully done. Yourself and Adele Coffey doing the moderating and bringing Ennis and the context of place into the conversation, did place it within a context. And I was very jealous not to be a member of one of the book groups. So some great ideas there, and thank you very much for that. So moving from a single art form festival to a very different kind of festival making, and actually indeed we're heading over to the UK now, and to welcome Rowan Cannon. Rowan and her business partner Sarah Bird run a company called Wild Rumpus, which is described on the website as a social enterprise producing large-scale outdoor events, most often in wild natural landscapes. The organization have an office and a workshop space called The Forge in a woodland area, which looks absolutely delightful, where they work year-round on art projects. But they also run 2 greenfield site festivals for families. I'm not sure we have anything similar in Ireland, so I'm looking forward to hearing more about them. Just So Festival is one of the festivals, is described as an annual intimate week-long camping festival for children and their families. And Timber is a weekend festival of debate, celebration and reflection in a national forest, at which people are invited to join with artists, musicians and writers as they respond and react to the forest in bold and exhilarating ways. Rowan, you're very welcome, and I'm looking forward to hearing what about these festivals and your organization.
Thanks, David, and thank you all so much for having me. I'm afraid my internet was the culprit for us starting a little bit late, and it might be patchy. So if my presentation isn't showing, if someone can just give me a wave, I'll just turn that off and just talk at you. I'll see if sharing my screen will work okay. Can you see that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. So we... First of all, I'm very aware that the landscape in the UK and Ireland is quite different, both in terms of festivals and in terms of where we are with COVID. But mainly when I was listening to John and Dani, what I just felt was such familiarity with those kind of dealing with the shifting sands that we've all been walking on over the last year. We at Wild Rumpus produce a wide range of different events. We are mainly interested in how arts and culture and nature can blend together in a festival setting. So our festival events are primarily, although not entirely, in greenfield spaces. Our 2 main festivals each year are Just So Festival, which is a family arts festival, weekend camping festival, and Timber Festival, which is another weekend camping festival, which is mainly about our relationship with nature, in particular trees and woodlands. As an organisation, we're a kind of relatively small non-profit arts organisation. We're not an Arts Council England national portfolio organisation, so we don't get regular year-round funding. We are funded through project funding and through kind of our commercial endeavours as well. And I would say that the way that we work is, the way that we look at how we work is kind of twofold. We face outwards to audiences, and that's through our festivals, but also through commissions from other organisations, the National Trust, Chester Zoo, the Forestry Commission England, and also kind of a range of smaller public engagement that we do, which has all until the last year or so primarily been live. And then facing inwards, as David mentioned, we work from 4 acres of woodland and a farmhouse and rural space, which is an artist residency space based in the Cheshire countryside. We kind of contribute to the UK outdoor arts sector by supporting artist development of new work, by hosting kind of symposiums and networks primarily around outdoor arts and about sustainability advocacy. And we have a talent development program of kind of volunteer programs and training, and young producers, young artists, interns, kind of quite a broad range of different activities there. When COVID hit last year, it kind of gave us such pause for thought because, as everyone here is, we are also all about connecting people together, but we're also so much about connecting people to nature. And I think we very much felt at the point at which everybody was looking at what is that digital offer to replace or kind of temporarily step in for our live experiences. I think we found that really difficult because we felt that gathering in nature for that collective experience is such a catalyst for change and is so deeply important to what we do. And I guess I can break that down into the kind of the community that comes together. We are a weekend camping festival, both just and timber, and so people gather in terms of the artists and crew and volunteers and tech team. We gather for 10 days and there is a huge kind of community of like-minded people who come together, and then we're joined by another 5,000 people who are the audience who come together over the weekend, and it feels so physical that I think it felt so difficult for us to wrestle that apart from from a digital offer which obviously has that distance. And then we're interested in exploration and activism. I think being in green spaces, being in natural landscapes lends itself to exploration. When we program a site, which often what we put in is so site specific, and people are exploring along forest pathways and sitting by the lake, and the programming that we put in relates directly to that. And I think that is very kind of close to our hearts, and the activism that comes of speaking in those green places and coming together and gathering like-minded communities, I think is quite visceral. But of course, COVID had hit, and so we had, as we all had, we had to take a long, hard look at ourselves. And what we did is we thought, we tried to go back to what the heart of what our ethos was as an organisation, and that we're not talking about, although we put on our festivals and they do bring people together, the heart of that is that we want to connect people to nature, and that is mainly across all of our activities what we're most interested in. And so we did a range of different activities, none of which were digital iterations of live experiences or live festival production. The main project we did was this one here, which is called Sounds of the Forest, where we thought, what would we like audiences to do if we can't stand in a woodland with them and stand in front of a stage and watch a gig and feel together? How can we make people kind of feel together separately, as it were? And so what we did is we invited people to go and record a minute of sound from a forest or woodland or green space near them and send them to us and upload them to a sound map, which is the Sounds of the Forest sound map. We've had over 1,000 sounds submitted now internationally, and actually the kind of power of it has surprised us, I think, in the impact it's had on individuals' lives, but also as a collective experience and as a collective archive. We now have sounds, for example, from Californian redwood forests that were recorded back in May last year, and then now there have been wildfires and those forests don't exist anymore, so we actually have an archive of forests that don't now exist. So there's kind of power there in creating that, and I think there's definitely a feeling of the people who did submit their sounds and then go and listen back, that they are part of something that is collective and that is about that direct connection to nature, even if they're not physically together. And then looking ahead, we're going to be, we've commissioned 3 new pieces of music inspired by the Sounds of the Forest project and the sounds that have been gathered, which we are planning and hoping and desperate to be performed at Timber in 2021. These are the artists that we've got lined up. And so we are currently planning to go ahead in 2021. The UK roadmap is currently suggesting that we will be able to go ahead with our festivals in July and in August. We have plans A, B, C, D, E, F, G, as we all do, and contingencies in place, but we are currently looking to go ahead. And so we're looking at what we learned from last year, what we learned about from changing our programming, And I think the main thing is to look beyond the familiar. I think we had Just So Festival had gone into its 10th year last year. It is very easy to look to, audiences ask for what they know and what they love, and so it's always easy to look for the familiar, and I think we'd fallen into that that habit a little bit. So to look beyond and look beyond the familiar is what we've learned from it. I think we've shied away too much from digital in the past as an organisation. I think we felt that visible, physical connection to the natural world had to be analogue. And I think if the Sounds of the Forest project has taught us anything, is that it cannot be. Sorry, David.
Yeah, just if we can work towards the end now. Or...
Yes, I think I have one more slide after this one. To take your time, to be considered and thoughtful, to have an extra year to plan this year's festivals, 2021 festivals, has felt like such a gift, although it has come through such awful circumstance. To have an extra year to put into the thinking about projects and programming has been wonderful. I've put in here to be kind. I think I've never felt more than I have this year, that the personal relationships that have been built up through the festivals are and that collective family that we have built through the work that we do, and the kind of shared goals that we have, and the kindness that has been given and taken across the sector has been so heartening. And I think that's what, if I could take anything from this year and keep it, that's what it'd be. And I guess that though I do think that moments of collective wonder are possible in the digital realm, I am a person who wants to have them in the flesh, and I think that I will learn from this year. I think I will learn from it, and but step back outside. I want to gather with people. I want to be physically with people. I want to stand in forests and watch gigs and have goosebumps, and I want to do it hand in hand with people, not through a screen.
Thank you very much, Rowan. Well, I had heard about timber from somebody a couple of years ago, and it struck me as a model that we don't have in Ireland, one that I really love to come. So hopefully I can stand side by side with you with those goosebumps. And I love the idea of being kind. I think that's such a lovely reminder to us all. And this is a wonderful community of festival makers in Ireland. So it's great to have somebody who's sharing with us their experience coming from outside. And we all know about the idea of having plan A, plan B, plan C. In fact, at our last panel, we had somebody talking to us about scenario planning, this concept that I think is going to be part of our future. And it's great to put up your email. I would suggest that if anybody wants to further conversation with any of the speakers, that one way to do that would be directly through direct contact. I'm sure they'd all be very happy to respond. So we're going to move on to if Dani has had a few weeks since her festival. Our next speaker, Grace Toland, is fresh from her festival, which was on last weekend. Grace is a proud Donegal lady, or maybe I should say an Inishowen lady, and a passionate supporter of the rich, unaccompanied singing tradition of her native peninsula. Grace is the joint organizer of the Inishowen Singing Weekend, a volunteer-run organization that has recently, as I say, just last weekend, completed its 31st edition in an online version, which I had the pleasure of attending from my home in Tipperary. So I look forward to hearing now about the organizers' perspective on this and how the traditional singing community envisage the evolving future of festival making. You're very welcome, Grace. Are you on mute?
That would help first. So firstly, thanks a million. It's lovely to be part of something like this, especially after coming out of a complete Zoom weekend. So first of all, just I suppose just to let you know a wee bit about who we are. If you bear with me 1 second. Yeah, so the Inishowen Traditional Singer Circle, we organise an annual event. So we've just come out of it. I suppose just to tell you a wee bit about ourselves first, we are a voluntary organisation and set up in 1988. So it's going back quite a long time. And we've always had the same mission to make sure to strive to keep singing accessible, relevant and alive in our community. And we do that through a number of ways. So it's organising ways for people to come together and sing. And then platforms as well, so that people will know about how we sing, what we sing, and that we share and take part in it. And the whole idea is to keep this alive in the community. We're quite good at doing festivals in the reality. So you can see here, this was us 2 years ago. We have kind of muscle memory as a group of how to put on a physical festival. So we could, if you said to us now, next weekend, Grace, will you put a festival together? We could actually do that. We kind of know, our venues know us. So this was all very familiar territory for us. You know, the planning, the inviting people, getting the whole thing together. So this time last year, we had our lovely program together. We had our festival set up. You can see quite nicely laid out for ourselves. Everyone was coming. We knew the B&Bs were booked. We were getting the messages. We were, you know, deciding on how many sandwiches should be at the pubs. All those sort of mundane things were going on. And unfortunately, this happened to us. So on the 10th of March, having, you know, put our time in together and working as a group, our festival was cancelled. It was gone. I have to say that we went into, I would say, shock, complete shock as an organisation. But that didn't really matter because we were in shock as individuals and as a community about COVID. So, okay, our festival went, but we were all going, look, we don't know where we're going with this, but let's just put it aside for now. A lot of people came to our aid. Actually, I think the first Zoom singing session was run in our honour on the 21st of March, run out of Dublin and out of Ohio. So a lot of people stepped in knowing that, you know, this was a momentous moment for us, the first festival that we'd missed in 31 years. So what did we do? This is what we always do. We go back to our basics of who we are as an organisation. Looking again at what our ethos was, opportunities to meet and sing, platforms for what we do, to keep things relevant. So we decided we'd need a plan. That's what we did after the shock wore off. So the first thing was to get our group, our local group of people back together. So we have these monthly, quite local online Zoom events going on. We decided that we would run a festival because that was a big decision when the Arts Council grants came out. Will we or will we not go ahead? Because singing has an intimacy. Looking at where Rowan was looking at outside in the forests and in trees, we are packed into small pubs, packed in on top of each other. There was no way we could be outside. So all of these things wasn't going to work. We then took on another project to keep ourselves busy. We decided to revamp our digital exhibition with the Irish Traditional Music Archive. We pulled a community group of 15 volunteers together to work online. Then when capacity building support came from the Arts Council, we decided as well, this is now the time to start looking at ourselves and what we're like now. Actually, it was a really opportune time to look at strategy and where we are. So next thing, what you have to do, you have to get organized. So we had a plan. The plan had to be flexible. We've gone back to Carl Wallace, I think, with 3 plans since we started. Inishowen is now part 1, part 2 in December. We needed a new infrastructure, Zoom meetings, Google Drive, WhatsApp. We needed to look at the expertise that was in our group, and we needed to make sure that our volunteer group was not excluded because they were not digitally able to, deliver certain things. So we pulled in some new people. So the things that were really important to us were the video making and video editing skills and social media. So they were some of the ones that were really important to us. You then need to, running a festival like ours, you need to talk about content. And we are really, really lucky in having an extensive media archive going back for years, where we've archived our festival, video, audio. We've taken photographers in every year to look at what we're doing. So we've a lot of things going on. You need to look at rights clearance. There was an awful lot of background. So we had these sort of things going on. And then deciding the platforms, as other people spoke, website, Zoom. We went for Facebook and YouTube, Instagram and Twitter. I'm going to just show you just a tiny bit now of, this is what the festival looked like. It's a wee bit of a pull together, but you'll get 45 seconds. You might get an idea of what it looked like online this weekend. Hi folks, the Inishowen International Folk Song and Ballad Seminar is back for 2021. The Inishowen Singing Weekend is live online 19th to the 21st of March. We've got talks, workshops, films, live sessions and a grand concert. So check out our website, inishowensinging.ie, then register for the events on Zoom and just get yourself well stocked up and ready for a great weekend of song and friendship, because you're very welcome in Inishowen. Oops, there he goes again. So that's a cut through of a promo and actually the recordings of some of the live events that happened online. So we had 11 video events, pre-recorded, curated materials, 6 live Zoom events. We had social media updating all the time. We ran a box office, donations, and a support desk. They were all running as we went along over the weekend. Just a wee bit then coming back, looking at a small amount of the impact. Now, I know Facebook is not one to look when you see reach, like we did not reach 48,000 people. But I think what is really interesting is the post engagement. And that's where over that since February, and we are very, sitting on a nice wee line until it got to our festival, we had a huge amount of people interacting online with what we were doing, liking the posts, sharing them, commenting. And that was a really, really strong factor for us. We had never had a YouTube channel, but we needed it for our videos. So look, we didn't go viral, but I think it's amazing to think we've 1,000 views of those 7 curated videos so far. We've, the idea of having 62 people subscribing, okay, it's not earth shattering, but it's really important. It's giving us a new platform. Just looking at what's next, and I'm going to finish off with a few insights just from after, but what's next for us is that we're going to continue with this digital project revamp as a group. We're looking at our new strategy, and we're going to continue with those local singing sessions. Then part 2 of our festival will run in December, which is going to be the blended. So on reflecting on what we're doing, and we're going to have our first meeting just at the weekend after we all have caught our breath. What are we going to do with this amazing new online audience that we have? We've really upped our figures in terms of, followers on all our platforms. Do we just let them go home, or do we need to start maintaining them by delivering something continuously to that community? I think for Inishowen 2022, will we be able to run a hybrid event? I think we'll test out in December and start looking at it then. What's it going to have on an impact on the numbers actually coming to Inishowen? We are in a remote geographical part of the world. You can't go any further north in Ireland and on the island of Ireland. What we're a bit worried is, okay, will the numbers go down? But equally, if the numbers go up because of this online engagement in a small community, if the figures keep climbing, how will we deal with that? And that could be a great thing to worry about, but it is something we need to be concerned. We would need to think about. The last bit, I suppose, is just bringing to the fore is that the sustainability of voluntary organisations like us in delivering professional events. it's not about the capacity of our group of people. We have a lot of really high valued skills and we can deliver this. But I think there is increased pressure on and strain on us in continuously delivering at this level. And I think it is something that we would like to see the funding model for festivals is in some way to address or look at the amount of benefit in kind work that has been done by voluntary festivals across Ireland, just like ourselves. But it was a fantastic, rewarding weekend to have done. I think this is one of the nicest. We got lots and lots of messages from people, but I think this was one of the nicest things that was said about us. And I think it's that we seem to have struck a chord with people in that they felt they were with us while we were online. And I think it is always about going back to the basics about who you are as an organization. And whatever, if you're doing it digitally or doing it offline, keep that to the back of your mind. And again, we all want to be together in 2022, but we're flexible. We're just going to have to stay with it. So maybe in December, what you may do, if you go back to the basics, some of you may want to join us on the 10th, 11th December. And why not have a trip to Inishowen? You may not even have to leave this Zoom.
So hubs won't be big enough, I think.
Grand. Thanks a million, folks.
Thank you very, very much, Grace. And after a weekend in front of your computer, taking the time to prepare that and be with us here today, I hope you're going to give yourself a bit of a break now.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's really interesting to hear the idea, I mean, Inishowen, small voluntary run organization, with the same question of now having two audiences. So that's interesting that theme has come out. And I'm really appreciate, and I'm sure I speak for Carl and my colleagues in the Arts Council, that that question about the sustainability of voluntary organizations continuing to deliver professional events, I think is a very, very good point. It was very well made, and it's certainly, I think it's something we need to hear and possibly discuss in how that can happen in the future. To move along now, we're going to move away from funded festivals to the commercial sector. It's a sector that when as a festival maker and as a producer, I did some work with the commercial festivals, music festivals in Ireland. And our next speaker, Avril Stanley, is the founder of The Body and Soul, an event which I believe has a unique place in the world of commercial festivals in Ireland. This festival was set up in 2010. It's a 3-day arts, music and well-being festival. Well-being being very common in our parlance today, but this has been going for 10 years, and it's held on the weekend of the summer solstice. Attendees at this Greenfield Camping Festival are immersed in a weekend of sensory exploration that includes music artists, theatrical interludes, beautiful art installations, gastronomic experiences, fragrant cocktails, masquerade balls, and indulgent well-being areas. Wouldn't we all love to be there now? So to share with us, how the commercial festival managed last year and how Body and Soul is imagining the future, you're very welcome, Avril. Now, are you with us, Avril?
Yeah, I'm just unmuting myself. Can you hear me? Thanks very much. The commercial festival, well, our festival sounds fabulous. I want to go myself. Thanks for the lovely intro. So I guess, when I think about, one of the questions that was posed as part of this conversation was around whether our festival has been able to deliver on its mission during COVID. And my response to that is in many ways, in certain ways, yes, and in many ways, no. The reason for that is in essence, Body and Soul is an independent festival, but it is also deemed to be a commercial entity. And at the point in time where a force majeure was called in Ireland by our government, and rightly so, we were 7 months into the production. We were just about to go on site to start a major build of a large scale stage that we had commissioned for 2020. All of our programs were ready to be announced, and we had, 9 stages and venues and immersive environments ready to pop. So that far into the game, really the best that we could really do, from my perspective, I had to spend a long time dealing with the impact of the cancellation, liaising with suppliers, sponsors, artists, landowners, all the various different stakeholders that are part of the festival, with all of our team. And so the months that came after COVID were certainly not months that I could put down to be inspirational. They were painful, they were difficult, they were incredibly challenging. And I guess when you're an organization that doesn't have funding, you don't have anything to lean into other than the reserves that you've built up in your company. So that was definitely a wake-up call. And yet there's no festival that isn't ready for that moment in time where they have a bad year, or where there's a year where, it rains terribly, or the sales aren't as good as you anticipate. So you do have to prepare, and all festivals should prepare for a rainy day, but none of us anticipated this level of rain. This is like deluge, the biggest monsoon we've ever seen in our lives that continues. So from that perspective, in terms of how we were able to respond and come back to our community, there were simple ways. At the time of the festival itself, we did a project where we did a Body and Soul at Home project, where we did a lovely PDF pack for people with everything from cocktail recipes to brunch menus from one of our favorite foodies at the festival, through to collaborating with the internet radio station called the Isolation Station, that's made up of lots of Body and Soul staff, crew, DJs, friends. We put out all the archives of some of the best acts that have performed over the years, and invited our audience to create their own festival at home. So that was just a really fun way for people to document and communicate and play, and just have some level of positivity across the weekend, which at a time up to 6 people were allowed to gather. So, that seems like a wild party in comparison to where we are now. And then on the Sunday of Body and Soul, we did something called Soul Sessions, which again, there's a yin and a yang to Body and Soul. There's a playful creative side, but there's also a participatory side, but there's also a part of it where there's an invitation for people to go a little deeper and to delve into themselves a little bit. So from that perspective, we filmed in a beautiful place called Shell Cottage. We filmed everything from yoga to singer-songwriters, musicians, performers, an aerialist, and a talk on the significance of the summer solstice. So, and put all of that on our website so that people could be part of it and join it online. After that, we went back into dealing with the deluge of the festival for quite a long period of time, but we were fortunate enough to avail of some funding with the Live Performance Support Scheme. And through that, we did our first ever short film. And I think that's part of this world of COVID that we're part of right now, where you're thrown into the unknown, and yet there's an opportunity there to adapt and to look to create in new ways and in new kind of modes. And so Aries Threshold was our first ever short film that we did, and it was a collaboration with a wonderful woman by the name of Mary Hickson and our own team within Body and Soul. And that was really interesting to go into the world of film. Like, how do you take the festival experience? How do you take the beauty of Ballinlough Castle? How do you create a narrative and turn it into a story that has some level of purpose and meaning? So with that, we chose the theme of death and rebirth, because we felt it was an opportunity to reflect on the times that we're part of. And I believe through it, we created something quite beautiful. I can share the links after for you to put on the website, David. And then at the moment, everything in our life is about funding. We're for the first time ever, we can actually avail of funding. And that's an amazing opportunity that's come out of these times, even though they're incredibly difficult times for everybody. There's also a chance of opportunity there. We've also been commissioned to, not commissioned, we've received an award to do something in the Botanical Gardens in June, which will be over 10 days. And again, even with that, it's about how can we do something where we're not just putting people into the online sphere, because that's not really our sphere. And with that, we are taking people into nature. We're working with authors, with musicians, and fusing it into a narrative that takes people between a city and a garden is what it's called. It'll show up in Cork City, and it'll also show up in the Botanical Gardens. So I guess that's a little snapshot of some of the ways in which we've been able to adapt to COVID to the best of our ability. But the key part in all of this is that it's been funding dependent, and therefore, like everybody, it takes a lot of time and effort and resources even to apply for funding, and one may or may not be successful. And that's the name of the game right now, and we're very much in that world. In terms of, I'm doing a time check because I'm aware that I only have a minute and a half left. In terms of looking at, you know, the future, from our perspective, we were already pivoting before COVID came, because we grew into being a very large scale festival from our perspective, and realized that wasn't quite our terrain, that we actually wanted to return back to the roots of Body and Soul, and return back to what was important for us, which is things such as sustainability, creativity, innovation, thinking outside of the box, you know, being leaders versus followers, setting the bar of what a festival can be, using it as a platform to affect positive change, galvanizing our community to, you know, to really like live their best selves, and, you know, to come away from the festival experience having learned something, having met new fans, having found something new in yourself, that there's just that sense of galvanizing a sense of community and positivity in our own small way. Where we stand right now, our festival going forward, like everybody, we of course have to look at this hybrid model. There's no way around it. We have no idea how long COVID or whatever else may come our way will continue for. And so it is really important to dig deep and to establish the capacity to look at that digital realm and the hybrid realm in a way that we can deliver successful events. But the place that I've come to within all of this that's really true to my heart is that our expression in the festival landscape is in person, it's flesh to flesh, it's you know, in the moment together in a field, and whatever it takes, that's the world that we will continue to return to, even if it means doing several intimate events, smaller events, 10 events during the year. We have an incredible site in Ballinlough Castle. We've built permanent stages. We have, you know, woodlands, wall gardens, lakeside, a beautiful castle, and, you know, 150 acres that are there to be explored and used throughout the year. And I guess it really, you know, these times from, again, they bring you back to that place of what matters, who do we want to be, how do we want to show up in the world, who are our audience, how can we meet them to the best of our ability, how can we co-create together, how can we navigate these times of uncertainty collectively, and how can we respond artistically to that in a way that really ignites the creative community, but also invites our participants, you know, the audience, to come on board and be part of that. So co-creation is definitely our future. Hybrid events reticently will be our future. And hopefully we can learn from these times and share our knowledge and our experience together, and not be so siloed into these different categories, where ultimately we're all on the same team pushing for the same thing, and that is hopefully to make the world a better, more interesting and more inspirational place. I could keep talking for another 10 minutes, but yeah. I'm at 9 now.
Avril, that is very inspiring and a lovely way to finish the panel presentations. When Carl and I were planning this, we realized, much like last year, that we were more likely to get questions than answers. And I think you have just given us many questions, but also many answers there. And I think there has been a lot of reticence about taking that digital step by many. And in the next panel session in 2 weeks' time, we're going to be looking at that. It has been the panel I've found it most difficult to plan, the most difficult conversations, because it's such a new domain for many of us that we're just starting to understand. And it's lovely to see the sort of synergy between the event that you presented, and the importance of nature and well-being and Rowan's. And indeed, we've had a very, very busy chat. There's I'm reminded of the Shaking the Bog Festival, which is a new festival down in Wicklow that has a similar theme. So as we would have known from those who attended the last seminar, we had a speaker from the Festival Academy, and she shared with us how festivals across Europe, the idea of sustainability is becoming a very, very central theme in the conversations that are happening during COVID. So it's nice to see it creeping in here too. So the chat is very busy with lots of questions that are also being answered. So that's really super, and we will save a copy of that. I wanted to come back to a question that was asked at the beginning. I don't think there's an easy answer to it. So I don't know who asked the question, but it was directed, John, to yourself, and about the budget cost of creating COVID-safe environments. Could you give us some indication, without disclosing too much, of your financial planning of how of that in terms of an impact that we as a sector might need to consider?
Well, not giving you a cliche, but it is how long is a piece of string. Like, it depends on how many venues you're trying to do it in. But no matter what you do, there's a certain amount, around PPE, there's definitely a factor around health and safety statements, that kind. It's more admin heavy. And I think it is also operationally a lot heavier in terms of ensuring social distancing, etc. are there. So it's not massive, but it's there in terms of signage, PPE gear, and just that whole operational feel. There's a whole new layer of operation that goes in there just to administer it and ensure the best standards are maintained throughout. I know I'm not particularly giving a number, but it totally depends on your size, but it definitely is an extra cost. And it's a cost you can't avoid going forward. And I don't, like, it has been my experience, and I'm around a while, that, we've gone up a level in admin. I've never seen a situation where admin went, well, we'll drop back down again. Temporary admin always becomes permanent. So I think we're going to face into that there is going to be an extra cost for, especially festivals are odd in the sense, what festivals do best is gather people together. But the government have saying for the last year is, no matter what happens, don't bring people together. So our job now is to bring people together in this kind of safer environment. And I think there'll be a hangover from COVID in terms of admin and safety that will go on for some time, and it will be a significant cost to the sector overall.
Thank you, John. And Avril, do you envisage greenfield site festivals happening this summer?
I mean, listen, I dream of them happening this summer, but no, I don't think so. Based on where we're at within the vaccination program, I think it is highly, highly, highly unlikely. And even less so for camping weekend festivals. I genuinely don't think that'll take place this summer. Yeah, maybe one-day events where people are tested upon entry, but not currently as things stand.
Mm. Yes, the dream is there, however. The
intention, the dream, and the readiness is there, but I think we need to be practical, and also I think we need to really be mindful of our resources and sustainable, because this is going to continue, and we need to be, ready to move when we can move, but not constantly be hanging in that limbo land. So ultimately, it's good when a decision is made as well around what we can and can't do around capacities in the future going forward for festivals, so that we can plan accordingly.
Thank you. There's a question there from Marie Fleming, which I'm going to direct at you, Dani. Did you have some events that were paid within the context of the Ennis Bookclub Festival?
We went with a donation-based model. Like, the September events are ticketed with an exact price, but we went with a donations-based model, which I know is kind of the trend with a lot of festivals now. So sometimes suggested, sometimes not. And we did quite well in that sense. I mean, nothing compared to like what the box office would normally be, but I think we booked the trend. Again, I wouldn't mind seeing some general statistics on kind of what festivals have experienced in that sense. I've heard anecdotally from other festival directors that 1 in 6 donate if you make it optional. We would have been higher than that. So, you know, that kind of felt like a win, but yeah.
And Grace, thank you, Dani. And Grace, did you have your events were all free, I think, if I'm
yeah, we went for the model that everything was free, but again, we did ask for donations. And sometimes I think, you know, when we were quite upfront about it too, about saying, you know, to help us keep going, you know, donations would be, and it did. And I think we had the higher than the 1 in 6 donation as well. And for some events, I think what we did was, you can have this free, but there are some extras. And if you donate, you will get those sent to you after the festival. So they're the kind of things that we did, and those sort of things are very encouraging to people to actually click the PayPal button.
Mm. And John, did you have last year? I'm trying to think back to my experience. I was the talks events were online. I attended some of them, but they would have been free.
Everything online was free with us.
Yeah, and are you considering charging into the future?
Yeah, well, yeah, with theatre, like that process has begun around theatre, and he was just doing live streaming theatre. So yeah, we're considering that process has started. Indeed,
and I was writing about that myself, and the enjoyment of watching Druid from my house in Tipperary is something. Obviously, it's not going to replace driving to Galway and sitting in the little theatre in Druid Lane, but I can't always do that. And as another comment in chat earlier on, Aileen Delan was making, that these initiatives have a huge impact in terms of people with disability, whether they be sensory disability, mobility issues, that people who've been crying out for access to the arts for years and were told it wasn't possible, and now that excuse isn't there. So it's sort of been a positive benefit. In fact, these are issues that will be tackled in our next session next week. We have some very interesting speakers, including so a representative from the disability community, to speak of how the COVID has impacted them both negatively and positively. So we're at our 4:30 time, and trying to keep to schedule. Sorry if I was brutal with my timekeeping. It did allow for a little bit of breathing time. We're going to move now. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and we're going to move then to breakaway rooms. But first, I'd like to, on behalf of Carl and Adrian, Regina, the festival team, I'd like to thank our speakers today, John, Dani, Rowan, Grace and Avril. I think it was fascinating to hear from both commercial and arts funded festivals, from greenfield site festivals, single art form festivals. I mean, there's such a diversity in the sector, and yet themes are emerging. So certainly from our perspective, in terms of, you know, future policy and funding initiatives, these are really important things to hear. So as I say, we're going to take a 5-minute break. Adrian is going to then move us into our rooms, where you will be in the capable hands of Adele, Eva, Francesca and Cleana, and we'll be also there in a capacity as listeners. And I think tomorrow Adrian will put up the registration for the next. So thank you all very, very much, and I look forward to seeing you after the breakout session. We're not coming back into this room, so we will see you all in 2 weeks' time, or around the country on Zoom or in person. So thank you all very much.